Your next adventure is waiting. See your Carolina Ford dealer today for a new Ford SUV.
Rochester Today with Andy Brownell and Tom Ostrom on News Talk 1340 KROC AM and 96.9 FM.
Good morning, Thursday morning. I'm Andy Brownell, and it is time to say hello again to Tom Ostrom. Morning, Tom.
Morning, Andy.
What's in the mailbag today?
This is passed on from a listener. Why does inclusiveness, the jargon of the liberals, include everything except opposing views?
It's somewhat related, but on social media I had seen a message from a person with connections to what the LGBTQ community.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very judgmental towards people who would vote for Donald Trump. Basically calling them immoral and I can't remember all the other descriptors, but judgmental would be the term I would use. And it came to me the irony of that, because people I know in that community, one of the things that they most expressed a wish for from society was non-judgment.
Yeah. And Biden even recently mentioned Trump should be locked up. And some people meant politically, and others think put in jail. So, yeah, you wonder. Another mailbag, Tom Stiglitz is a Creator Syndicate satirical cartoonist, too. And he's got America's Nightmare. And it shows Kamala standing by Waltz. And she's quoted as saying one of her remarks, "I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been." And then it shows Waltz, and he's saying, "I'm a knucklehead."
Oh, gosh.
And then Trump, with his fantastic success, passing out food at McDonald's, that has really been popular, and Democrats are furious about it. We've got something on that later in the show, but the cartoon by Gary Varville, a political cartoonist, shows Trump leaning out the window, and it's Kamala Harris's car that comes to his window through the drive-in and drive up, and Trump is holding her bag of food, but then he's eating out of the bag, and he says, "Kamala, I made your fries, and I'm eating your lunch." And then from Phil, people who don't like Trump should get over the personality judgment and figure out why they should vote for him, not personality, but to save freedom of speech. The Supreme Court justice appointments, pro-police, secure borders, legal immigration, and other things as to why one should vote for Trump and not against him or think of that. And then from Wayne, Tom, I really enjoyed your commentary on Tim Walz's pheasant hunting debacles. Kamala Harris says she owns a gun. I wonder if they'll go pheasant hunting together. Walz's pheasant hunt is reminiscent of 1988, Michael Dukakis running for office on camera with a tank helmet that looked ridiculous. And then Wayne says, who in Washington, D.C. leaked Israel's plan to attack Iran to the media? Well, I've got more on that later in the show. And that's the mailbag.
All right. The comparison to Dukakis, I would say one thing, at least I haven't seen it yet, it would be different. Whereas Governor Walz's issues with loading a shotgun have been spread on social media quite a bit. They haven't been used I haven't seen any campaign commercials that it's been used in. And Dukakis in the tank was plastered all over television in campaign ads that year. But maybe that's just a difference in the way these campaigns are conducted nowadays, that there's more reliance on social media than there was then. Of course, there wasn't social media then. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't keep it, but because I thought we talked about it enough. But Branko had a cartoon of Waltz trying to load his shotgun, and Branko had it very well drawn, the parts of a shotgun and disengagement from the barrel to the stock, and what entries you put the shell in, and and Waltz blundering trying to get the shell in the wrong place. Branko drew it so well. He must be a shotgun man. So we'll mention that now.
But I wonder, and this is just me wondering, I don't know, but, the old-fashioned shotgun where you fold it at the barrel and put the shells into the barrel, I think this might have been a semi-automatic where you load it a lot differently than that. But I have no idea. So we'll leave it at that and take a break. We'll be back in a moment with more Rochester Today with Tom Ostrom. Andy Brownell here on News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.
Rochester Today with Andy Brownell and Tom Ostrom on News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9 FM.
It's Rochester Today, Thursday morning with Tom Ostrom. I'm Andy Brownell. Tom, what do you have for us? Minnesota and local news concerns.
Oh, wonderful idea to preserve rural America and the agricultural community. From Minnesota News, $750,000 in federal funding is to be used to help new farmers find land locations in Minnesota. And there's a federal program for that. And Minnesota U.S. Senators Tina Smith and Amy Klobuchar are behind that funding to improve access for new farmers to Minnesota farmland. It renews the countryside Upper Midwest Farmland Access Hub, and this grant will help because a lot of farmers are retiring, and then people who want to be farmers would like access to their lands or purchasing their lands, and farm prices are high and acres change as older farmers retire, and it's a plan that Holland has adopted to keep their farm communities prosperous, and for beginning farmers in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa seeking land and access to land and guidance to the land that's being sold. And the politicians that I mentioned said this is a matter of security, options, strength, vitality, food production. And the United States Department of Agriculture reported the total number of farms in Minnesota as 65,300, which is 200 fewer than the year before, because farmers will sell their land to have retirement income, and maybe building projects will be on them. So farms are kind of hard to come by for young farmers that are looking to buy land. And one more thing, the agriculture sector is the backbone of rural community, Senator Klobuchar said, and we need to ensure the next generation of farmers have the support they need to succeed.
I think a larger trend is that we're seeing a massive consolidation of agriculture, that as these independent farmers retire, as you say, and put their land on market, they're often purchased by larger operations nearby. Some of them are family operations, but they're extended family operations that have grown from, a 300 to 400 acre farm to a 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 acre farm operation because of the economics involved, especially when the cost of equipment and fuel and fertilizer is factored in. The economies of scale apply to agriculture as well. So you're right. For these young folks trying to enter the agriculture industry, it's extremely hard for them to do so because they're competing against that larger trend and the amount of money that's behind it.
Yeah. Corporations buying up the land.
I know, but corporations sometimes can be four brothers and their nephews forming a corporation.
Yeah.
Not Cargill.
Yeah. Governor Walsh, the Democrat presidential or vice presidential aspirant, he said things that I think they could be said better. He said some unions aren't backing us. He was asked that. He was on a news talk show, a friendly show, and he was asked, why aren't unions supporting you and Kamala? The Democrats used to be the party of the working class. It seems Republicans are taking that mantle. And Walt said, well, they're not backing us because their leaders lack courage. They're afraid of their members. It doesn't make sense.
Well, that's pretty telling is what that would be.
Yeah. Walt said some of their leaders don't show the courage they need to, and our ticket has to be do a better job of explaining things. Well, that I agree with, and I don't think they're capable of doing it.
So, in other words, Walls is admitting that the rank and file blue collar worker is switching over to the Trump campaign, while the leadership of those unions are trying to retain their connection to the Democrats. I must point out the Democrats overwhelmingly win when it comes to public employee unions.
Yeah, that's right. But he says they lack courage, these leaders. Well, they say what they think, and the union members say what they think. I don't know why that's lacking courage. What can leaders do if their members disagree with them? What does he expect them to do? Oh, have to communicate the case better, he says.
Okay.
And when Kamala was in Wisconsin, at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, some Christian students appeared close to her. They were wearing Christian crosses, and she was speaking in favor of various things, and they talked about Jesus and pro-life stands. And she got real angry with them, and she looked at them and she said, "You're at the wrong rally. You're at the wrong rally." So she dissed these students, whether they were Protestant or Catholic, as she dissed the dinner, Al Smith dinner. And yet, after this session, she goes to a black church to cater to them because black men are not evidently voting for Democrats this time in the way they used to, and so she's catering to them. But she said, "You guys are at the wrong rally," and of course the crowd was friendly to her, not to the young men.
And those two young men have made a circuit of some of the television programs to tell their stories since that occurred. And I know that Harris, after the event, when asked, said that, I was referring that they mistakenly went to the wrong rally, that there was another rally nearby, and that's the one I thought they, meant to be at. But then not everybody, obviously, but the question was asked, what other rally? Nobody was aware of another rally nearby.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Okay. And then the Census Bureau says Minnesota lost 8,700 residents net in 2023, and over the years, 10,000 Minnesotans have moved to the Dakotas. So, again, lots of numbers, but Minnesota gained 100,000 residents from other parts of the United States, from blue states coming to us, but lost over the years 108,000. So there's two numbers I'm dealing with about losses that I don't really, I'm not able to clarify, but Minnesota's top source of residents from other parts of the U.S., Illinois, Oregon, California, Michigan, Washington, that's the Democrat blue states. and Minnesotans that are fleeing the state are going to red states, North Carolina, Florida, Texas, South Dakota, North Dakota.
Yeah, and there's a variety of reasons people leave, but if you look at that list of states, the one thing they certainly have in common is much lower taxes. You can't point to the weather because I'm not going to look at the Dakotas for great weather. And actually, Florida, I don't think the weather down there is all that great either, other than that 4-month stretch they have from January till June or
and
May.
North Dakota is a good North Dakota is a good oil state and employment source too. Then,
but on that issue as well, there are other reports that show that Minnesota is losing its young people, that they're choosing to leave the state to go to colleges elsewhere and then aren't coming back in a significant number. That was reported a while back by the Star Tribune, and there has been another report along a similar vein looking at households with incomes above $200,000, and there's been a larger outflow of that demographic than there has been an inflow of that demographic in recent years. So that would suggest Minnesota is losing some of its high earners, along with the young college-age students leaving, raising some concerns about what they call brain drain.
Yeah.
And the reasons behind it may be complicated, but one factor is, I think, that under the current business climate, this is just opinion, it's becoming harder and harder for recruiters for these Fortune 500 companies to convince people to come to Minnesota. I know we're a state that, I know Rochester is particularly known for this, that once you get somebody here, and I'm looking at the experience of Mayo Clinic, once you convince somebody to relocate, they tend to be happy once they're here. But getting them here is seemingly a large challenge for some obvious reasons, including the weather, but also the high taxes also, I believe, have to play a role in that.
Yeah, I think so. In the winter weather, and conservative students, males especially, are getting tired of wokery in colleges in their courses, and a lot of young men are going to trade schools where they go, including the red states, or they're going to the red states because those colleges are more conservative, as the general culture is.
One other topic before we take our break for news, and this is a continuation of something we talked about a month ago, but the numbers have actually become more stark. The most recent jobs data issued by the Walz administration continues to show the Rochester area, the metropolitan area, is by far the job growth engine of the state, which has historically not been the case. Historically, it's been the Twin Cities metro area. So over the past 12 months, the Rochester area has seen a net gain, there's that number again, of almost 8,000 jobs, which in my long time covering economics in this part of the world, that's the largest that number has ever been. Mm-hmm. And the reasons are obvious. But the more shocking number is last month when I talked about this, job gains in the Twin Cities were flat. Well, now, 1 month later, the year-over-year data shows the Twin Cities area has lost 7,000 jobs, which to me is an astounding number and suggests that there are some factors at play in the Twin Cities metro economy that are not good. It was quite routine to see year-over-year gains in the Twin Cities of 20,000 or more, and to see a 7,000 position loss over the space of 1 year, and the trend getting worse. If you look back over the past 3 to 4 months, that number has gone down, 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 and there's nothing to suggest it will go up, up, up anytime soon. I'm not sure what's happening.
Well, these corporate buildings that have office space, after COVID, people worked from home, and now employers or people that own those buildings want these workers to come from home to go back to the offices downtown, and workers don't want to do that. They
That's
like
true.
the convenience of home. The travel is challenging. The crime rates are challenging. So that's an element, too.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see if the Star Tribune or other larger media outlets in the state catch wind of this trend and actually come up with some sort of coverage of it, because I have not seen it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, time for a news break. Back in just a few moments with more of Rochester Today with Tom Ostrom. I'm Andy Brownell, and this is News Talk 1340, KROC AM at 96
FM.
Good morning. We're back. Rochester Today, Thursday morning with Tom Ostrom, and I'm Andy Brownell, and it is time for us to move on to national news topics.
Well, Trump was amazingly successful and a significant acuity to go work at McDonald's to tease Kamala, who said she worked there, but there's no record she did. And boy, the Democrats are furious with the good publicity that he got and the humanization that was how he treated customers and how they loved him. So the Democrats do what they're so good at. They decided they're going to go after McDonald's. How dare they have done that? And there was a letter written to McDonald's corporate hierarchy by Democrat Senators Wyden, Casey, and Elizabeth Warren. And they are sending a letter of warning to McDonald's that we're going to look into your price gouging. And it sends a message to other corporations not to be friendly because they'll go after them. They're so small-minded, but they think of the darndest ways to punish and retaliate.
Well, okay. Number one, McDonald's is a franchise operation. So the decision to allow Trump to appear in that McDonald's was made by a local owner. It wasn't made by the McDonald's Corporation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that they would go after the national outfit when their so-called offense was committed by a local businessman or woman. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the other part that I found comical about the response to this, I mean, it was a political stunt. It was a pretty good one.
Mm-hmm.
And now the complaints are, well, look at him. He's not wearing a hairnet.
Yeah.
He's not doing it right.
Yeah.
Or the other one is, this is a possible campaign finance law violation because they gave away free burgers.
Yeah.
Okay, good luck with that.
Yeah, and he paid for the burgers.
Yeah.
That he gave away.
So apparently a candidate for office can't hand out free burgers. You can hand out free swag, but not free burgers.
Isn't that something? The Pentagon, the nucleus of the American military system, is investigating leaked Israeli plans for their upcoming Iran attack. Did the leak come from hackers, or did the leak come from insiders? And the Defense Department says we're very concerned about this, and we will get to the bottom of it. The Pentagon spokesman used that phrase they use nowadays. This is deeply concerning. Deeply concerning. We'll get to the bottom of it. And the leakage in the public domain. And it's not clear who leaked it, but I just read an article that I'll pursue and maybe get into in the next show. Suspicions point to an Iranian-American woman in the Pentagon who was chided once before for her handling of Middle East information and Iranian information. And I'm not going to give her name till I have it in front of me. I may not give it then, but she's under suspicion, and we'll see what happens there.
You would think that would be a prison sentence for sure, if you could prove and prosecute. But it is complicated because this information, this intelligence, was shared with a number of other nations that are allied with the United States and Israel, including Great Britain, Canada. I can't remember the whole list anymore. So that kind of widens the field of suspects.
Yeah. A Florida sheriff has arrested 157 suspects for human trafficking, illegal aliens involved in it, and, of course, the horror of children being trafficked for sexuality. I don't recall a reporter ever asking Kamala about that. The open borders, they've sometimes hinted fentanyl is a problem, and she's answered that. I don't know why they don't bring up human trafficking and sexual selling of children and missing children because of that open border. That's so sad, so serious. But the Polk County, Florida sheriff has arrested illegal aliens from several countries involved in the trafficking, minors involved in it, and it's just a sad thing. The sheriff's last name is Judd, and he said, we arrested the people, and here they're being offered free medical, free food, free travel, housing, but we have these victims, and his unit and other police units went to homes where this was going on, and enslavement is what it was, and released women and children from this actually bondage.
There was one case, I remember, I read the news release from that sheriff's office on this case, and one of the people arrested but then later released was a woman who had been, I believe, if my memory serves me correct, from Colombia to Mexico and then into the U.S., and of course brought here by coyotes, as they call them, and then forced into a life of prostitution because of this amount of money plus interest and all sorts of intimidation that she owed to these coyotes. That's an example of the trafficking that you're talking about.
Wow.
That they believe is quite widespread. And another aspect to this, Tom, is one of the 157 people arrested is a guy from the Twin Cities who was down there and fell into one of these sting investigations that was tied to this bust, where officers go online and pose as children online, and this person is accused of communicating with this quote-unquote child who was actually an officer and trying to arrange a sexual encounter.
Wow.
Scary stuff.
It is so scary. Harris was at a town hall with Liz Cheney, the January 6th hero to Democrats in hearings, but Wyoming voters kicked her out of office because of her views. They used to call her father a warmonger, the Democrats, but now they love him and her as she's the anti-Trump queen. So Harris and Cheney were at a town hall, and Maria Shriver was the moderator, and she came out and told the audience there will be no questions from the audience. We have predetermined questions that are scripted and will be administered during this session.
So in other words, it really wasn't a town hall meeting.
No, and in other words, how much they mistrust Harris and maybe Cheney at responses to maybe some tough questions that might come from the audience. But when you talk about control and protection.
I had read some recent comments made by Governor Walz concerning the endorsement by Liz Cheney. And I think it was Jon Stewart, the comedian, political, pundit. And he was asking, what's the story? I'm paraphrasing. As you said, that Democrats, at one time, Cheney was one of the most hated men in the world if you were to talk to an average Democrat. I mean, as you point out, warmonger and all of that. And the question was, why? More or less. And Walz was like, yeah, but we're a big tent now, and we'd welcome people who, would support us over but then also qualified. Yeah, but don't worry, we're not going to implement any of their foreign policy ideas. I thought that was kind of funny.
Well, it's kind of funny, and what an answer. Boy. And Democrats have been deniers of elections or election deniers for many, many election seasons. Some of the top names in the Democrat Party since the time of Al Gore have questioned every Republican election victory. And yet they go after Republicans and even have jailed Republicans for being election deniers. I still don't know how they get away with that in our court system. But top Democrats now are saying, like Jamie Raskin, I will not commit to certifying the election of Trump. They have to, and other top Democrats said that they will not commit to certifying the election. We have to know it was fair and honest, and it showed many prominent Democrats like Hillary and others over the years that have simply objected to every election and saying the electoral count is wrong or the electors are wrong or we don't buy this or we really won. And Bernie Sanders can be added to that list, and they're ready to argue those things now in this election if Trump wins. You wonder what they'll come up with. Would some judge actually jail Trump if he wins, given the charges that have been leveled against him in other proceedings? But the Democrats are so famous for doing what they accuse others of doing.
Along that same line, I've been watching this with quite a bit of interest. That Trump made some comments a couple weeks ago, which I personally don't think were very smart comments to make, talking about the quote-unquote enemy within and at how he might use the National Guard to quell civil unrest after the election, and then in the same time span brings up Adam Schiff, who's always been, those two have been each other's throats for decades. Even before Trump was a politician, there was bad blood between those two. And then, of course, the Harris campaign grabbed a hold of that, and at almost every rally that she's attended since those statements, she has brought that up and used that to depict Trump as deranged and dangerous, and of quote again, a danger to our democracy, whatever it may be. And of course, then Trump deflected and said, "No, I was talking about civil unrest. If violence breaks out as a result of the election, I would use, the National Guard, perhaps the military, to deal with it and put it down before." I'm not saying he said this, but I think his meaning was before we have another situation like what happened in Minneapolis, major rioting or whatever. But the irony, once again, my favorite word, is that throughout the Biden administration, the FBI and other top officials have continually emphasized in their risk assessments to the United States the dangers posed by right-wing extremists or domestic terrorists. Yeah. And often pointing to people who are aligned with conservative causes as being potentially dangerous. In other words, the enemy within.
Sure. Sure.
Okay.
Sure. A good point. And the enemy within, the woke state, the deep state, the people that the woke agencies that, as you say, harass conservatives and prosecute them and even jail them. The enemy within, indeed, the extremists. I would say on the left, the enemy within, but and they're certainly enemies of Trump, and they're calling him the enemy within with the names they call him.
Well, it's become the theme of this election, one side or the other. But I still go back to, I think that was not a wise thing, the way that Trump phrased what he said, because it did open the door for that strongman argument that the Harris campaign has tried to capitalize on since. Even before that, Biden tried to capitalize on as well when he was campaigning.
Yeah, but now he's saying they should lock Trump up at this stage of the game. He said it the other day. And now people are saying, well, he didn't really mean that. He meant politically. And it goes on.
There's a good way to say it, Tom. It goes on and on and on. All right, we'll take a break. Back in just a moment. More Rochester Today coming up on News Talk 1340 KROC AM.
Rochester Today with Andy Brownell and Tom Ostrom on News Talk 1340 KROC AM and 96.9 FM.
News Talk 1340 KROC AM 96.9 FM. We have a few minutes left in the program. Rochester Today. Tom Ostrom. Tom, what do you want to cover for international affairs?
The Biden administration has given the Iranian regime access to over $200 billion with a B dollars in oil revenues through lax sanctions enforcement, and then allowing Iran to sell its oil and become enriched all over because we're not accessing our own reserves thanks to the Biden administration. But that's a repercussion that is making Iran strong and giving it the revenue to fund terror.
And some experts believe that number is actually much larger because it's almost impossible to estimate how much oil is getting out on smaller vessels. And also that does not include the $16 billion that was given back to the Iranians.
Yeah, wow. And Kamala Harris and Biden insist there are no wars going on under their regime. They're not paying much attention. U.S. bombers hit underground Houthi weapon sites with bunker-busting bombs in Yemen. Yemen is a tiny country in the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula, and I guess our military's been active there, going after the Houthis. The Houthis say they've been attacking ships and the bodies of water around that region and say they're going to still do it. And many shippers have transferred their ships to other bodies of water and avoided that. The U.S. Navy is there, and they've been attacked too, but they hit back.
And some would say it's about darn time.
Yeah, yeah, right. And then this problem of North Korea sending troops to the Russian army. I get a kick out of NATO and the West and Ukraine telling Putin who his allies should be or not be. Oh, China is aiding Russia, yeah, and now North Korea is. And it seems that even by Ukrainian sources, let alone Russian bragging, North Korea is sending a few thousand troops to the Russian army. There have been videos released of they're getting their uniforms and their weapons and their food. And right now it says they will be used in in Russia, to get Ukraine out of Russia. Some troops are operating in Russia. But then will they expand into the Ukraine itself? And you wonder about that because as Zelensky said, it's a serious threat, and so I have to have more weapons so we don't expand the war or let the war be expanded. And NATO is warning the North Koreans, if you fight in the Ukraine, this will be intolerable. But they're there, and we'll see what happens.
And they have been described by U.S. officials as North Korean Special Operations troops, which would, to me, indicate that they're more highly trained. And the development beyond the escalation worries that NATO has talked about, and you mentioned, Tom, South Korea is worried about this development because there are reports that this group, this contingent of soldiers is just the first wave, and that another wave of 20,000 or more may be headed to Russia to participate in the military operations in Ukraine. And South Korea is very concerned because that would give North Korea access to battle-hardened troops that they could station at a future date along the DMZ between the North and the South and worsen South Korea's security concerns.
Exactly. And their prestige and the threat they are, as you were saying. And right now, it's estimated by the West that 1,500 North Korean troops are in Russia and training, and eventual force estimates are 10,000, 12,000, or as you have just said, 20,000.
Yeah. Once again, the world is becoming a more dangerous place, including the developments in the Middle East where the Israelis have apparently killed another top Hezbollah commander who might have been the next in line to take over that organization. But with that, we are out of time. So we'll have to continue our discussions next Tuesday, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Look forward to it. You have a great weekend.
You too.
Thank you. Tom Ostrom, I'm Andy Brownell, and this is Rochester Today on News Talk 1340 KROC AM and 96.9